Divas! Oh my gosh, we have quite the show for you. What a treat. Today, guess who we've got here in the speakeasy with me? Florida Attorney General James Uthmeier. Yes, that's right. We talk all about his trajectory to the cabinet. We talk about how he got his start with President Donald Trump and so much more. Immigration, Hope Florida, and faith. Again, we have discussion about faith. So you do not want to miss this. Join us today with Florida Attorney General James Uthmeier.
We do have many immigrants there. Most of them, I would tell the Archbishop, have committed some very heinous crimes. I mean, you have murders, you have people that have committed rape, sexual assault, assault of children, human trafficking. This is real.
You're listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida. Let's dive in.
Oh, divas. I'm really pitter-pat today because I was just telling our special guest, you'll get to him in a second, that I woke up at 3:30 this morning and I was so anxious about this that I couldn't go back to sleep. So if I sound a little discombobulated, forgive me. We do have indeed a very special guest with us today. It's a tremendous honor for me to be joined here in the speakeasy by Attorney General James Uthmeier. Welcome to our little abode here.
Thank you for having me. And you pronounce my last name right, so you're one of 3 people in the state that can do that.
You know, I watched you getting interviewed by Forrest, and he actually taught me, and everybody does mispronounce it, so I'm glad that, thank you for noticing.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
You know, hopefully the first of a series of chats with you. And this is a conversation. So if anybody's expecting a gotcha or for me to debate a man who is much smarter than I am, you might want to just tune out right now because that's not going to
I don't know about that, but I've become accustomed to debates and certainly I'm not afraid of them.
You aren't. You definitely aren't because you are here, there, and everywhere. You haven't been in this office for too long, but I mean, my goodness, you are making waves every day. And, you know, I'd like to start with, let's just give our listeners, our divas, we call them divas, let's give them a little background on who you are and how you got here.
Sure. Well, grew up in the panhandle of Florida, loved every minute of growing up there. Ended up going to the University of Florida. I was a distance runner, cross country and track, and enjoyed a good 5 years there. Stayed 5 years. I was injured my first year and wanted to stay to complete eligibility. Had a great time there. Loved the university. I'm still very loyal to the University of Florida. And from there, ended up through a long story doing some campaign work for then candidate Marco Rubio for the U.S. Senate. I met him at a tailgate. Didn't know him at all. Wasn't really interested in politics, but finally accepted that I probably wasn't going to be an Olympian. The Kenyans and Ethiopians that were running in the SEC at the time, they smacked me around a little bit. So I accepted I need to go on and pursue a different career path. Marco ended up, winning that Senate race, and beat the odds. He was going against then Governor Charlie Crist, and in the beginning it looked like a very uphill battle. But I handed out signs and, did part-time minimum wage labor, ended up going up to work as a staff assistant, receptionist in his office. Tried to talk myself out of law school, but I got sucked into it, working on Capitol Hill on complex policy issues, always tended to come back to the courts and Supreme Court rulings. And so that drew me into law school, graduated from
And is that how you ended up at Georgetown? You were in Washington, and so...
That's right. Yeah, I was in D.C., liked D.C. as a young person. whether you're on the left or right side of the aisle, DC's filled with people that are so idealistic and want to change the world. And, I found that to be very attractive. You've got the history there. As a runner running the monuments all lit up
Oh,
at
wow.
night is just an emotional experience.
Sure.
So yeah, Georgetown's just a few blocks from the Capitol, which is great. I was able to continue working in the Senate in a couple different capacities during school. And then I went into private practice right after law school at a big law firm, Jones Day, that was doing a lot of religious liberty litigation in the Supreme Court, certainly suing the Obama administration quite a bit on the Obamacare topics. So that was kind of a good fit for me. And that law firm happens to be between Georgetown Law and the U.S. Capitol. So I kind of hovered in that same 4-block radius for several years.
Right. And then how did you end up hooking up with, it sounds a little salacious, but how did you end up going to work for Governor DeSantis?
Well, most people don't know it. I first did legal work for Donald Trump. Did legal work for his first campaign while at Jones Day.
Okay.
The law firm had a big election law division and represented 4 or 5 different candidates when Trump wanted to hire the firm. They didn't really have too many more associates to put on, those cases. So I'll never forget Don McGahn, who would later become White House counsel. He came into my office one day and joked around and, asked me if I wanted to work for the next president. And I didn't know which of the 4 clients of the firm he was talking about. And then he said, Donald Trump. And, at the time, Trump had talked every few years about running and then wouldn't actually pull the trigger. So I don't know that, everybody was taking it seriously, but it did not take long for it to become very apparent that he was serious. He was willing to talk about issues that other candidates were afraid to talk about, one being immigration.
Did you think he would win?
It only took me a few weeks to realize there's something different here. He ran his campaigns differently. He did not pay consultants exorbitant amounts.
Right.
There was a lot of grassroots support, and people would get, they would get incentives. If you get 20,000 people to a rally, you get a big bonus. If you get all, signatures to get on the ballot quickly, you get a big bonus. But he worked with a very lean team. I think at one point he had 7 or 8 employees, while Hillary Clinton on the other side had almost 90. But he was able to work the media in a new way.
Wow.
Everything he said got attention. And he just ran a very smart campaign and built a grassroots movement, just trying to get a little bit more and a little bit more, with every week that would go by. So I ended up going into his administration after he won. I worked on the transition team for Wilbur Ross, who was kind of one of his trade advisors. Wilbur would become the Secretary of Commerce, and I served as counsel and an advisor to him on trade, infrastructure, and a host of issues. The census is housed at Commerce.
Right. We'll talk about the census
The hurricane
again later.
hunters are housed at Commerce. I mean, Commerce is really a catch-all of many various sub-agencies that most of the public doesn't know.
Yeah.
So I did that for 2 weeks or 2 years, sorry. And then, after going back and forth to China so many times, I kind of missed home.
Right.
I was newly married, and
my
wife, Jean, and I decided that we really wanted to get back to North Florida to raise a family. And that's about the same time that Governor DeSantis was elected. So I'd met him in D.C., had a lot of mutual friends and contacts, and he was looking for a new legal team for his administration, and that seemed like the perfect fit to get back to Tallahassee for what I thought would just be a year or two of continued public service, and then I'd finally go back and make some money again in the private sector. But alas, here I am.
Well, you are, really devoted to public service now. I mean, you're worked for him for going on 7 years. Is that 7 years? 6 years?
Yeah, man, that sounds about right. Yeah.
And possibly you could do 8 years as Attorney General. So that would be a long, I'm not projecting your future for you, but it's interesting because you seem to have really clicked with Governor DeSantis. I'd really like for you to talk to me about how your ideologies, your philosophies, your legal approach, your approach to the courts and governing seem to really have meshed. Am I right?
You are, absolutely. Well, I'd say, most of the state really, started to believe in and love Ron DeSantis in COVID. And my
Mm.
experience is very similar. I was his deputy general counsel, became his general counsel as COVID was in the early stages where a lot of tough decisions were getting made. And as a lawyer, I mean, we faced first impression issues every day during COVID. I mean, first, for the very, very short period of time, admittedly, we were closing businesses down while we tried to understand what was this crisis, what
Mm-hmm.
was this emergency, how did we need to protect our citizens? And Ron DeSantis, I mean, he spent full days every day trying to study county by county data, global data, any study that was out there. He was getting his hands on it and dissecting it and reading through the crosstabs, trying to understand, what is the impact on our citizens. Ultimately, after many weeks, we realized that to the extent there was some benefit in shutting everything down, there were potentially greater harms in schools being closed and
Mm.
kids being out of school, getting into trouble, and parents not being able to work because they're having to stay home and raise their kids, and kids not being able to learn in person where you can see mouths moving. So we decided to reopen the state, get back to normal. We had to fight teachers' unions and school districts to force open schools in a very creative way where many people argued we did not have the authority. We had to fight to keep religious institutions open, even where local governments wanted to shut them down. So you had many separation of powers issues, political question issues, tough legal questions that as a young lawyer
Right.
are very exciting. And so I got to see the way Governor DeSantis thinks. I got to see his principle. I watched people tell him the blood of our kids is going to be on your hands if you do this, but
It was
he
very
did it anyway. He
intense.
did
It
the
was
right
very
thing, and
intense.
at the end of the day, he was proven right. Florida's now ranked at the top of almost every meaningful metric, and we're now called the free state of Florida, and people are flocking here from around the country.
I've talked about this before. You probably haven't heard it. I don't know if you listen to the show or not, but my cousins live in the New Jersey area and they are huge Ron DeSantis fans. And the COVID handling is really the issue. They own small businesses. I meet people who have young children. Obviously, I don't, but I forget how traumatic that time was for young parents. It was really a struggle for
It
them,
was.
and it was scary. It
Mhm.
was scary for me in different ways as an older person with a chronic illness and being isolated and the uncertainty and all that. But I think that there are people who came into the Republican camp and became believers in Ron DeSantis, and I think that was the one issue that brought them over the line, right? I mean, you run campaigns. You
That's
could tell
right.
me if
I
I'm right
think
or wrong.
people saw hysteria, in a way that was not driven by scientific methodology.
But I think it's important to remember also, again, not debating you, people did die. I mean, I
Sure.
know people who died, and it was scary, and there were people who did need to be protected, and what we can say about how it was handled
Sure.
at some points,
Oh,
but
it was
it is
tragic.
a thing
Yeah.
that happened that people are still in fact dying from.
It was absolutely tragic. A lot of people did suffer.
Yeah.
But what I think we saw was a lot of these proposed mandates were not going to make a difference. A virus like this that's highly contagious is going to have to work its way through a population, and you can, the 6 foot separation is probably not ultimately going to make a difference. Some of these cloth masks where
I
people
know.
were, wearing them below their nose. I mean, I remember
People still do that.
driving by a T-ball game where all these kids are wearing their masks, running around, interfering with their breathing. A lot of it had sweat and clay, and is this really accomplishing the goal, or are we subscribing to some political ideology? I hated the politics that arose in COVID, but the reality is you had two very different courses of operation. So Florida led the way, for a lot of conservative, I'll call free states that wanted people to make their own choices and mask their kids if they want, send their kids to school if they want, or do the online school. And if you would have had an Andrew Gillum, politics aside, I think there's a pretty good chance he would have gone the way of California and a lot of the other states that did stay closed down for a much longer period of time. And if you look at Florida's education scores, if you look at our GDP growth, if you look at new business formations, the incoming population, I mean, we really have hit our stride and have become, the light shining city on a hill for the rest of the country to follow. And I believe we reached that position coming out of COVID.
And we'll be right back with James Uthmeier. Divas, you know what time it is. It's that time. The news in haikus. The news in haikus. This week's haiku offered by our guest, Attorney General James Uthmeier. By oath I stand firm, guarding children, law, and truth. It is right and just. That's the news in haikus this week from Attorney General James Uthmeier. Don't forget, we'd love to hear your haiku. You can slide them into my DMs, or you can send them to podcasts, that's podcasts with an S, at e.newsserviceflorida.com. Wherever you're listening, please don't forget to subscribe and give us a rating if you like what we're doing. And we're back here in the Speakeasy with Florida Attorney General James Uthmeier. Right now, we're in the middle of another giant controversy, a lot of litigation being defended by your office and lawyers that are working for your office. And that's the immigration, the enforcement of the immigration. I mentioned to you as we were setting up that Archbishop Wenski was our guest. You're just butting up against him, not literally, not figuratively, but yes, he was our last guest. And he had a lot of thoughts about Alligator Alcatraz. A lot of people have a lot of thoughts about Alligator Alcatraz. I do editing. I write stories. I've read a lot of the litigation, a lot of the filings by the state, the feds, the plaintiffs. So I'm pretty rehearsed in that. We subscribe to Getty Pictures. And when I'm looking for pictures to go, I see that people standing out in front of the sign, taking pictures of themselves with doing the thumbs up and stuff. So I know it's controversial. And first things first, as we talk about this, the President Trump came down here and he credited you with this great idea and coming up with this idea and this location. So tell the divas, was this your idea and how long have you been working on it?
Well, it's interesting. We've been looking at this piece of land for a long period of time. It crosses over both Collier and Miami-Dade County lines. The county has owned it, I think, basically forever. There was an airport that was constructed back in the 60s and 70s. They were going to have the Concorde flights flying out of there. Ultimately, they decided...
Oh my gosh, the Concorde flights.
Ultimately, they scrapped the program. The facility was never made operational. But you have an 11,000-foot runway. You've got a lot of tarmac space. It's over 30 square miles of development that's all already been developed. The governor's office, our state, did not do that for the detention site. And Miami-Dade's been upkeeping it. But we've been talking about the state acquiring it, for either the state guard or emergency management purposes. So, as I've been traveling the state working with the sheriffs on the immigration enforcement, we are detaining a lot of individuals. Florida's leading the way in supporting the Trump administration. And we kept hearing from sheriffs, we're gonna have a detention issue. We need more help. Homeland Security was saying the same thing.
They need more beds.
And, I saw President Trump proposing, to open the original Alcatraz And I don't know if that can happen or not. And obviously, this is somewhat of a different context, but it kind of gave me the idea. I said, well, you know what? We need more detention space here in Florida. We've got this facility. It's over 30 square miles. I know the environmentalists are alleging that we're impacting the environment, but as we've argued in court, there's no permanent infrastructure, no brick and mortar, no plumbing. I mean, everything is brought in and out. It's light infrastructure, tents, and
soft-sided.
Yeah,
I think they call it the soft-sided facility south or something. The feds, I've seen that, right?
I would actually say this is a great example of sustainability. If we need to house a population that's been relocated due to a hurricane or a disaster, I mean, we're doing some novel things here, bringing in water, bringing in bathrooms, bringing in temporary kitchens. We in less than a week were able to stand up a facility that could house thousands of people very safely, getting them the resources they need, and we'd have the ability to move it, on a dime. So it's worked out well. We do have many immigrants there. Most of them, I would tell the Archbishop, have committed some very heinous crimes. I mean, you have murders, you have people that have committed rape, sexual assault, assault of children, human trafficking. I'll get you the list of a lot of the people there if you want it. I mean, this is real. You have people that have committed heinous crimes in this facility, and I do not see the Archbishop, going out and calling out these crimes, talking about praying for the victims, giving out the example of the victims. And I know that the Archbishop has had a strong opinion on immigration, but at the end of the day, you have to have security and sovereignty. And I've been to the Vatican many times, one of my favorite places in the world. There's a giant wall surrounding it. It's secured. You can't just roll in. You got to go through the right way. They've got the Swiss Guard that's there conducting security. You go through metal detectors. You got to have an appointment in many cases. So, I mean, security is central to safety, public safety for American families. And that's why I think enforcing the law is so critical. And I'm appreciative that the Trump administration has done so.
I certainly don't want to channel what Archbishop Wensky, I don't want to speak for him. You can listen and hear what he has to say. But I think one of the things that he did tell me was he's concerned about the kind of dehumanization when you're saying like, oh, we're going to use alligators and snakes to keep people from running away because that's the kind of security we're going to use, and to call it Alcatraz when people, not everyone, and not everyone who is there, according to what I've read, now I could be wrong, but not everyone who is there is someone who has committed a crime. This is civil crime. Not everyone who's committed a criminal crime. And so there are bad guys there, but they're not all bad guys. And some of them have been in the process of trying to do the right thing, working through the immigration courts, and then they kind of drop off the face of the earth and their lawyers can't find them. So there's a lot of issues. We could debate this for a very long time, but there's a lot of other things I'd like to talk about. And I don't feel like it's my job to do that with you right now.
No, I'm enjoying the discussion. Okay. I'll very quickly just point out two things.
And I would love to have that list. If you've got the list of everyone, I'll take you up on that offer. So, but
sure, I'll get you some examples, and I mean you'll see some of the dangerous people that that have been there, that are there, and what they've done is pretty gruesome.
Right.
But look, number one, it saved a lot of money having a perimeter that doesn't need to be maximum security. I mean, if you get into the Everglades there's really nowhere to go.
What about the Miccosukkees? They say that's like right up against where they live, and their kids get dropped off for school. Their school bus picks them up right near that gate, I think, and they do their sacred ceremonial activities there.
If you go to that airport facility, again, that hasn't been operational for commercial use, but there were many more flights landing prior to Alligator Alcatraz for law enforcement training. Some of the companies would use it for training of pilots. So it was operational.
But you didn't have all those bad guys living right there on your doorstep.
Well, if you go to that facility, you see that it's 30 square miles. It's not like you're, sitting right next door to
Okay.
somebody's bus stop. It
Yeah.
takes a while to get there. It's not easy. It's very secure. You have quite a few guardsmen and troopers and people that, that are protecting the only road in.
Right.
But if somebody was to get out, the point is, they're probably not going to make it far. And the last thing I'll say is, it was a way to get attention where people that are here illegally could see, I've got options. I can continue to remain in this country illegally. I may end up at a facility like that if I stay, but the federal government has advertised very clearly that I can get $1,000 and they'll provide the transportation to get me back home. That is out there. And following the release of Alligator Alcatraz, you saw a huge uptick in self-deportations. And I think we're up to almost 2 million people that have done it, through the official process. Now, a lot of people might be going back without talking to anybody. I think that's probably the case. Who wants to pick up the phone and call DHS if you're here illegally?
You don't want to risk.
So you have a lot of people going back on their own, and ultimately this is saving the federal government taxpayer dollars as it works to enforce the law.
And so you're getting ready to open. Again, not you personally. I still think of you as part of the DeSantis administration, but you're not, because you are a cabinet officer, and so you've got your own. You're separate and distinct. So.
Well, I'm still part of the team.
Are you? Okay. Well, then I don't have to feel bad about that. But so you're getting ready to open up, you all are getting ready to open up another facility at the Baker CI, which was shut down as part of their not having enough staff and whatever. And then how many beds altogether do you think Florida will provide? I've gotten all kinds of different numbers about the Everglades facility. I think there's going to be 1,600. Well,
it depends, what court orders come out, when you're counting.
Right. Well, let's thank you for reminding me. There is a court order right now that is still active. I know that you guys are appealing that, and I've been waiting to see. I haven't seen it pop up on the 11th Circuit docket yet, but I'm sure that'll happen
It's
moment.
Been filed, so it should show up soon.
Okay, all right. Well, Judge Williams found you in contempt in another case, and then she told y'all to wind this down within 60 days and don't bring any more people there. Are you still bringing more people there, or what are you doing?
I don't know that I can speak for the governor on that
That's
one.
right.
What I can say is it continues to be operational.
Yeah.
I know flights are deporting people out.
Sure.
The plan is to have this other facility ready if needed, but we are filing the appeal. We do feel very good about our legal arguments on the merits. The plaintiffs argued that we did not go through the federal NEPA process. This is an environmental permitting process. Our arguments are this is state land. It's a state facility. It's managed and operated by all state actors. So just as one of our jails wouldn't need to go through NEPA if they're expanding, this doesn't need to go through NEPA either. If ultimately, the appellate court would disagree and say because you're getting some sort of federal reimbursement, even though it's a state facility, and by the way, we have state jails and other facilities do get federal money, so I don't agree with that argument at all. But if for some reason an appellate panel would disagree, then, we've got other sites like Deportation Depot, Camp Blanding. There's a site near Homestead in Southwest Florida where we would be able to continue the mission. So we're always going to be able to open up more detention space as the feds might need it, but they're also, opening up sites in other states, and then the big beautiful bill provided a lot of resources for their own detention space.
I love alliteration. You can ask him right over there that sometimes too much with the headlines, and he's kind of rolling his eyes. Jim Saunders, my colleague in the next office, but you guys, the Trump administration and the DeSantis administration, the Uthmeier administration, you guys love you some alliteration, huh?
I guess good marketing depends on it sometimes. So, Alligator Alcatraz, I don't know that was the goal. It just kind of came to mind.
I know that they monetized the RPOF, that label, that name, you don't regret that? You don't feel like that is dehumanizing or anything like that?
No, I look, at the end of the day, I think some of it's just letting the public know we're enforcing the law. I mean, this
Mhm.
is a different era, a different administration. You no longer have a federal government and cooperating sanctuary state partners saying, we see all these laws on the books, and we're going to take the position that we're going to abdicate responsibility and not enforce them at all. The public should know. It's what a large majority elected. Immigration enforcement is very popular. Even a lot of
Yeah.
Democrats have now realized, we were losing our sovereignty. It was hurting taxpayers when it comes to education, healthcare, taxation on our infrastructure, certainly the criminal justice component, as we've seen hundreds of thousands of convicted felons, like prior convicts,
Yeah.
either a judge or jury has ruled and they're here illegally, and then ultimately they were released back into society. It's popular to enforce our border and to ensure that we're enforcing against illegal immigration. And I think the shirts are a way to let the public know we're doing the job you elected us to do.
Thank you for that. And, we talked a little bit, we were kind of setting up, and we mentioned the Archbishop. You are a Catholic, you're a devout Catholic. I think I can say that for you.
That's true.
And you're very, open about that. And and so I wanted to talk a little bit about, do you ever find yourself in a position where your faith is like where you have to square your faith with what you're doing as a policymaker or as a political figure?
I'll tell you, my faith drives me every day. I start every day in prayer as we're facing tough issues. I pray about them, and I've got a lot of members of my team that are also faithful people. So I would say it's just organically become a central part of who we are as an office. And yes, I mean, issues like immigration, I think require prayer and contemplation. And I love everybody. I might not like what they do. Some things might frustrate me. As I, we just a couple months ago, we secured a conviction against an illegal alien who, brutally molested a little girl and actually sold her out to other individuals. And this was somebody that had overstayed a worker visa by several years, had no prior criminal history.
Mm.
So had that offense not happened, critics of what our policy goals are might say, well, this person was brought in lawfully, was on a worker visa, overstated. That's an accident. It happens. Why are you going to be so harsh? And the reality is we don't know who all these people are. When you come in, when you deviate from a legal reason to be in the country, there is a giant risk. So when I see these horrific things happen to victims, a lot of them kids, if you know anything about me, kids are the number one priority,
Yeah.
protecting them. My goal, my oath, is to Florida citizens. It's not to people that smuggled into this country illegally from other places. So I believe enforcing the law. The law is on the books.
Hmm.
If the people want to change it, they can do that through the democratic process. But I take an oath to uphold and defend the law. I did that with my hand on a Bible, with my family standing next to me at swearing in. And these laws are on the books.
Right. I guess my question was, is there any area that maybe you find a conflict? For example, I have a friend who's also a very devout Christian, and he contemplated running for lieutenant governor many years ago and decided that he couldn't do it because he is really opposed ideologically, spiritually to the death penalty.
Sure.
Is there anything that you find like you have to, squint your eyes, or you have to, is a challenge for you
If something is going to
and
be,
it's fine if there isn't.
Yeah,
I'm not
no,
trying to make you,
if something's going to be a moral conflict to me,
Yeah.
if it's going to conflict
Yeah.
with my teachings and principles
Mhm.
as a member of the Catholic Church, then I'm not going to do it. If something's going to be a moral conflict for me, I will not do it. And I think you have too many people out there that hold their nose and do things that violate their principles. So no, the answer is no. I won't do anything that
So
conflicts.
you've never come across anything like that?
I would say, the death penalty is probably a topic that I've spent the most time, thinking about, praying about. It's a tough issue.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I don't believe these are innocent lives. I believe they've committed horrific acts. I think an opportunity to meet their maker is in many cases warranted. I mean, we're spending millions of dollars to house these people that are on death row.
Although we do have people who have been on death row who have been exonerated.
That's true. And I would say the governor, spends a lot of time scrutinizing the individuals that are on death row. We certainly make sure there is no...
Have you ever witnessed an execution?
I have not.
I have.
Have you done that?
Yeah,
you went down there?
Not many, but several times I have. And then I actually made a decision that I was not going to anymore just because of...
Not going to go or not going to...
Not going to witness.
Not to put you
No, I have
the...
actually witnessed. I've been in there as a witness, and I decided I wasn't going to be a witness anymore.
Right. I bet.
And then I wrote about it. It's very... it's a lot.
Yeah, no, it is.
On your psyche.
It is.
So, yeah. Well, thank you for thank you for that heartfelt answer. Let's move on because we're running out of time already. I could talk to you all day, like I said.
I might be able to squeeze an extra few minutes here.
I wanted to talk a little bit. We talked about your administration, the governor's administration. You're moving now into a statewide race to be elected to the office that you now hold.
Sure.
Are you finding it? Do you feel like you're going to have to separate yourself from the governor a little more for that, or do you want to? Is there a process where you're becoming your own kind of entity? I see you holding a lot of press conferences. I'm getting a lot of emails like, okay, AG is going to be here, there. So I'm wondering, are you? Standing into the spotlight yourself now. The
governor is very popular around the state. I think people realize, he's delivered so many victories over the last 6, 7 years. Things like universal school choice, record funding increases for law enforcement. I mean, that people realize that. The governor's so good at seeing how to help people in a way that is realized. Toll relief, good example. We had record reserves as a state, and he was trying to think, all right, we don't need 22, 23 billion in reserves as a state. No economist would ever say that's necessary. So we have a duty to get money back into the pockets of our taxpayers. And it was his idea. He said, we need to find a way to do toll relief. Well, then, some of the economic nerds, they would say, well, now we're going to benefit all the tourists. And the governor says, no, let's do it for commuters.
Right.
If they tick 30 times in a month, they're clearly not here on vacation. They're going back and forth to work. So people appreciate what he's done. I subscribe to most of his policy ideals. We're very similar in that regard, but I am my own man. I've got to go out. I've got to do my own events. I've got to introduce myself to the people of Florida, not as this staffer that was sitting in a cubicle in the Capitol for 6 years, but as a leader who's going to fight for the issues they care about, who's going to fight no matter the cost and the arrows that come at me, and who's not going to back down from doing the right thing. And that's what we're doing.
You're 37.
That's right.
37 years old. I thought for sure when I did a little Googling on you for the past 3 days that you would be the youngest attorney general.
I'm told somebody's got me by a few months.
I guess. I couldn't believe there was a younger, and you guys, the Divas can't see you, but he has quite the baby face too. So, you could pass for 27.
Well, I had to grow a beard so people would think I was old enough for the job.
It's very trendy among your cohorts. I wanted to ask you about that. You're part of this young, a group of young Republican conservatives, many of whom have very deep faith like you do, that have really come to power. We're seeing them in the Trump administration. We see them in the DeSantis administration, very significant leadership positions. How do you think, what kind of a approach do you think you bring? What kind of a novelty do you bring to governing, being among that cohort?
Well, I'm going to be an energetic executive for the office. I mean, I think you have a lot of public figures out there. They enjoy some of the comforts of the job. They enjoy the cocktail parties. They enjoy the long golf trips and the access you get to things. And they're not doing the job every day. And I think some of the young people that have energy, that are driven by faith, that have gone into public service for the right reasons, they want to get results every day. And if you follow what our office is doing, I mean, we are working hard and delivering results for the people of Florida every single minute of every single day. And that's certainly my approach. You mentioned, going into a statewide election.
Mm-hmm.
If I've learned anything from the governor, it's that, people will elect you to do a job if they can tell you're doing it well. If you're delivering results, that's the best campaigning that you can do. So in the last 6-7 months I've been in office, I mean, we've put a record number of child predators away, big priority of the office. We've rescued a record number of children in that time period that were, previously reported missing. These are kids that have gone through some very tough things and now are on the road to recovery, but at least back in our possession. We've taken down drug rings, large-scale fentanyl. We've gone after the cartels. I mean, we have done big things to show the people of Florida that we are going to fight crime and keep you safe. So, I'm deviating from your question a little bit, but I would say people want to see energy.
I see what we're going to see on the campaign trail, and I think that's, you're doing a lot. As I said, I mean, I set you up for that. It's every day. It seems like something new. A lot of it's themed, a lot of the safety of children and a lot of immigration related things. I think you're right that a young, energetic, a young family and a young person, in contrast to what we see, especially in Washington, with some people that are so old, they can.
Too many people go into these jobs for the wrong reason.
And they stay there forever.
They become obsessed with the job. It's their identity. Right. It's their everything. So they compromise in the wrong way. They bend the knee. They're willing to do whatever it takes to keep the position. And, I'm going to do what I think is right. And if people don't want to keep me in office next year down the road, I'll move back to the beach and spend more time with my kids, and it'll be, what God intended. So I think we need more leaders, and our citizens want more leaders that are going to do the right thing no matter what. And that's a Ron DeSantis. It's what I endeavor to do. And I look forward to working with other leaders out there that care less about reelection than they do, fighting for the most vulnerable and delivering justice where it's due.
I want to ask you, I love when you segue into a question that I have way down there, but I want to ask you, following up on that, who in, living or dead, is someone who you admire, who you model yourself after?
I'll give you two answers. One, I can't help but going with George Washington. I know it's perhaps somewhat cliche, but we wouldn't have a country but for him. And if you look throughout history, when generals take over a country in revolution, almost always, every single time, they take power and they rule as a dictatorship. And here you have a guy that was worshipped, who they literally begged to be a king, and he submitted himself before the legislative body. He handed over the keys to the country and said, I am ceding power to you. Not too many people are going to do that. He also, he just wanted to go home. He set his own term limits when he could have ruled as president forever, because at the end of the day, he believed public service was just that. It was service to the public for a period of time. And he kept begging, I just want to go back home, to Mount Vernon. So I would say him, number one. Number two would be my dad.
Your dad, I love that.
He was a small business owner. He owned an outdoor advertising company and was really growing at a time when, these billboards on the side of the road were adapting to technology and becoming digital. There was a period of time where they had Tri-Visions that would rotate signs. And He was growing the company, doing very well, but he was traveling, wasn't really home with the kids, and ended up selling the company and really devoting himself to the family for a number of years. He would get into real estate and some other things down the
Mm-hmm.
road, but he was my substitute teacher in school. He was my high school, or my coach in Little League baseball. I mean, he was around all the time, and I didn't recall that as a younger kid.
All right.
So he was so formative in my development, and I was somebody that was lucky enough to go to college and have strong discipline, not fall off the wagon. Have always had a good work ethic, and I credit it really to my dad and my mom too. I
Right.
can't forget her. They
Right.
were so present in my life and communicative and great examples. And I'm undoubtedly who I am today because they were around. So I feel for kids that
Well,
grow
here's
up.
this for your parents. That's to Mr. and Mrs. Uthmeier. Thank you very much. Great job, parents. I want to go back to something you said about George Washington, because I find it interesting that Governor DeSantis, and even to some extent your office, we are seeing a flexing of the executive office powers in ways that a lot of Floridians maybe found alarming or different or new. And I think that is like a test. I don't know if you were all intentionally testing the system to see how it would hold up, but am I wrong? Is this an era where we're seeing a much stronger executive use of the executive, I think much stronger use of the executive power than we had maybe in previous years?
I would agree with you. If you read Federalist Papers 70, you'll see that Alexander Hamilton and many of the founders, they believed one of the most critical elements of our country would be the energetic executive. While the anti-federalists and others were afraid of a unitary executive having, run from a monarch, a tyrant, they believed that you needed a strong, singular individual to make decisions in tough times,
Mhm.
like COVID.
Mhm.
And that is a good thing. You want the branches to flex. Separation of powers works where the different branches check on one another. So if the judiciary, slaps the governor down, which they've done from time to time, some of them, I believe, validly and some not. And I'll point out our record on appeal is pretty dang good.
I was going to say you're going up to the 11th. I didn't get a chance. I didn't want to interrupt you, but yeah, you really,
we got a good
had a
win-loss
really good-
record
yes,
at the 11th.
you do.
But my point is, if a governor is exceeding his power, another branch of government is going to check and will have the tools, both legally and the political means to flex back and exercise their own power. But at the end of the day, I think the people, they elect leaders that they want to work hard and deliver results. And at the end of the day, our democratic process is going to send somebody packing pretty quickly if people don't like the job that he or she is doing. And that's the greatest political check that our founders gave us.
I know we're running out. You said you can maybe
Probably got another 10 minutes
Okay,
left,
well, I
yeah.
would be shunned out of the Capitol Press Corps if I did not ask you about Hope, Florida.
Sure.
So, what can you tell us about Hope, Florida? And is it over? Are we done? Is there an investigation? Can you tell us?
Nobody's ever asked me any question. I've never received a subpoena. The
Okay.
media says, oh, he was subpoenaed.
Yeah.
I've never received a subpoena for anything. There's no evidence of any illegal activity whatsoever. I think it was a sham investigation. I think you've got a lot of complaints coming from people that are interested parties. You certainly have a state representative with a bone to pick, but he's got strong ties to the marijuana industry that I don't think likes me very much right now. And you've got Democrats now piling on. And at the end of the day, I mean, my involvement in this whole thing, I worked on the outside on a political committee that I think the press occasionally confuses with candidate committees that are restricted in a different way under the IRS. But I worked on a political committee to combat the public recreation marijuana amendment, Amendment 3.
Mm-hmm.
And there were other nonprofit groups that applied for grants from the DSO, and ultimately did some of their own things and supported the larger C4 effort, but nothing illegal. You might disagree with the policy approach to Amendment 3. You might disagree with some of the efforts there to combat it. But
Yeah.
at this point, certainly no competent lawyer that I know has made any real complaint about a legal issue.
Would you do it differently now, looking back on it? Would you just have them maybe write a check to the committee and not go through the, not connect it to the settlement, just write a check to the committee? And
my involvement was really on the outside
I
there.
see.
You got different people doing different things. I had never talked to the nonprofit board members. I mean, I had nothing to do there. At the end of the day, we had a lot of people that supported the Keep Florida Clean 501c4 effort on the outside that spearheaded the campaign efforts, working with a lot of partners to combat Amendment 3. And I'm thankful that we were successful, because I think it would have changed our way of life, changed our economy, and endangered kids in the state.
What do you think? Do you think they're going to get on the ballot next year? Do you think the Supreme Court will let it on the ballot? I mean, we've got this now, we have a new ballot initiative, some restrictions there that are being litigated. I'm just wondering, do you think it'll get on the ballot? And if so, do you think it'll win?
It's a good question. I don't know. This one is worded differently to address some of the concerns. My office will still point out in the Supreme Court, any ambiguities or things that we think are misleading in the amendment. But the court now, has already let a similar amendment on at least once.
Mm-hmm.
I do see public opinion going down on the topic. I think while, it was on the rise for a little while, people are now traveling and they're seeing restaurants and things close down in Manhattan, and they're seeing emergency room rates go up threefold in a lot of jurisdictions in Colorado and California for children, as things like the gummies and
Right.
expand. So I certainly think there's a big difference between marijuana use and the privacy of your home. I know a lot of people with health issues that have had tremendous benefits from marijuana use. So there's certainly a medical benefit in many cases. But the last amendment, written broadly, where it could be used, a constitutional right, to authorize it in public places, I think was dangerous for our way of life. And ultimately, the voters seem to agree with that.
I do. I'm on the sin beat. I call it the sin beat, the vice beat. I covered this marijuana issue in Florida for many years. You probably were in law school still when I started writing about this. And you came out with something that I also have written about, and I'm getting inundated by these folks on both sides. The kratom issue is wild. It is really wild. I mean, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And you recently came out, and then really quickly you had to adjust to lower the percentage, because I think they had started already with a 7-hydroxy. I'm just going to call it 7-hydroxy because that's easier for me than whatever the real name is. And then I call them like the kratom leaf. I don't know. It's like it's this really interesting intra-kratom industry food fight, right?
It is interesting. It's all very novel. A lot of it is chemically manipulated or enhanced. We saw that kratom is certainly, a plant that comes from Southeast Asia. But this 7-hydroxy 7-hydroxy naturally metabolizes in that plant, but at much smaller doses, which is why we had to make some of the adjustments in the rule. But what happens is it gets extracted and then chemically enhanced to high potency levels. And we've seen some examples where commercially sold products were more than 13 times more potent than morphine.
Mm.
And while maybe there's a medical use for that if prescribed by a doctor, like selling that in a retail store is very dangerous for kids. So the FDA, they put out a warning. They asked Florida to look at what we could do to, combat this danger. We were getting reports of heightened hospitalizations due to this 7-OH or hydroxy across the state. So we decided, let's do something very rare. But let's issue this emergency rule, emergency scheduling. And that, in my opinion, I'm a limited government guy. I don't want government to get in the way of business except in the rarest of circumstances. And this was one of these. But that only is in effect until the legislature meets. They can either ratify it, modify it, or come up with their own legislation. And I know this is a hot topic as well as hemp and vapes and
It's certainly hot topic in my inbox. I can tell you that right now. Yeah. Oh yeah, every day I'm getting some from both sides every day. So we're the good guys. No, we're the good guys. No, we're the good guys. So it's really kind of confusing
there's
for
there's a lot of debate. But I'll say for me, it was an easy call. If you've got, we had examples of some kids dying because of this, people getting hurt. And if it's on a shelf next to candy and kids can get at it and we don't exactly know what it is yet, we just know that it's got high potency. I'm going to side on the part of children and the parents, the moms out there that want us to protect the kids. And then we can let the legislature come in and do something more permanent if they need to.
Okay, I know we're getting close to time. I have some fun questions, and then I wanted to ask you about social media.
Sure.
First, let's ask the fun questions.
All right.
Although social media can be fun, but not really. What's your favorite app on your phone?
My favorite app is probably my wife's text, the picture. I've got her at the top, so I see her face, and I click on her message, function quite a lot.
Yeah. So you guys are texting during the day?
Now that she found out how to track where I'm going, with that GPS thing, so I did it to her back, and it's actually kind of fun. I can see, she's at the grocery store, or she's, at the park
tell her,
with the kids.
Don't forget to get me some. What do you want?
I'm admittedly now on, on X quite a bit. As a staffer, I wasn't. I didn't have one. I had to kind of figure out what that was once I became the governor's chief of staff, just to keep up with the news that's out there and always changing.
So you do this, you have two accounts. You've got your AG account, and then you've got your James Uthmeier account. So I'm following both, and I've got columns for both of those on my tweet deck. So do you do your own, or do you have your people?
I certainly have help from staff, but I'm pretty involved, maybe more so than the average principal. I'll put it that way.
What's one thing about you that our divas might not know that you feel like you can share with us?
One thing that people don't know. I mean, most people don't know that I was a distance runner at the time. Let me think of another fun one. I love Italian food. Oh. I'm obsessed with Italian food.
Really? Do you cook?
Not well enough to enjoy Italian food. I'm not bad on a grill, but my wife's pretty good, and she shares the interest. We both love Italy and our time over there. So if we're planning for our ideal meal, it's good Italian pasta.
It's good Italian pasta. That's my favorite too. So, with the limited number of news outlets and the press conferences and everything, well, let me ask you, where do you get most of your news? There's so much noise, and you talk about social media. We'll finish with this. Where do you get most of your news? I'm sure you're a subscriber of the News Service of Florida, and that's like your number one news source. Other than that, where do you get your news?
I try to get it everywhere. I really do. I mean, I spend a lot of time online. I still read the print newspaper. I'm kind of old fashioned in that regard. I read it most mornings. I'll read everything from the Tallahassee Democrat to the New York Times, and I feel like you get some international coverage in the times that you're not going to get elsewhere. And I read things that I think are in many ways polarized and critical, because I like to see what critics are saying, and it helps me, formulate my defense of what I believe is right and just and true. So everywhere, I'm certainly on Twitter or X as much as many others. But I would say I follow key people and what they're talking about as much as news itself. People that I know are really looking at things in a way that I find to be effective.
Sure.
One example is a guy who's a lawyer, a friend, Josh Hammer.
Okay.
His podcast was probably the first that I ever stumbled upon during COVID, and I
Okay.
feel like his discussion of current events and citation of other news and sources is exactly what I would want mine to be. So it kind of helps when you're busy to know who's looking at the right
Sure.
things and tuning into them.
Well, I know we kept you. Is there anything that you'd like to add before I say goodbye to Attorney General James Uthmeier?
I don't think so. I mean, I might conclude by asking the Archbishop where in the Catechism he gets some of his points, and ask him again to look at a lot of the victims out there that have suffered greatly by many of these immigrants. But you know what? When we come back for round 2, maybe we can go into that further.
Okay, so you all Divas heard it. He just promised to come back for round 2.
I would be glad to.
Thank you so much for coming. It's been a real treat. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida, hosted by News Service senior writer Dara Cam and produced by me, Mike Exline. Music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC.